Hello everyone. So far all of my Python tutorial videos have been contained in single files, and this is unlikely going to change unless it's absolutely necessary for videos. However, in actual programming projects, this is not how you should be doing it, especially when you have a lot of classes or a lot of functions, or both. So in this video, I'm going to talk about importing so that you will be able to break up and organize your code into different files, but still use all of your classes, functions, and even variables across your entire program. These files are also referred to as modules, and the way classes, functions, and even variables are grouped together in modules usually depends on how they relate to each other. Classes would usually be stored in their own individual files, but sometimes for one reason or another, they could be grouped together in the same file. Functions are typically stored in files that group them with other functions that they have some form of commonality with, but sometimes they can be stored in the same file as other classes. Variables are usually stored in files alongside functions and classes that use them or share something in common with them as well. They can also just be stored in files that only contain variables. Variables that are stored in this manner usually serve as some sort of constant value, but can also be used to store something that can be modified when necessary. Now, there are different ways to import stuff in Python, and there are a couple of keywords that you will need to know as well. First, I'll go over the different variations of import statements that you can use in Python. Then I'll go over the different situations that can affect how importing works in Python. Finally, I'll demonstrate how to handle dynamic importing. For this video, I'm going to be using the item class stuff from the previous video. I've cleared out all the code used for the inheritance demonstration and replaced it with the simple print statement here, and I'll explain why I have it a little later in the video. Okay, so in order to teach you the various keywords that are used in import statements, and in order to show you the different forms that an import statement can take, I have created this separate Python file called main.py, and it is from this file that we will call upon the classes from the item file. So the first example is simply just using the keyword import. And as you can see right here, we have import item, which is basically the name of the item file without the extension. Whenever you're importing from a module, you're importing from a Python file, but you leave out the Python extension. And so when we import a module, we're basically loading everything in the file into memory. And anything at the highest level, like say maybe there's more import statements up here that this file may be importing, or for example, this print statement here at the bottom, anything that exists outside of a class or function definition, like variables, function calls, imports, and print statements, those will get executed when this file gets loaded into memory when this import line is called. And when we import a module like this, where it's just import the module name like item, when we want to call upon the classes, we have to reference the module name first. So as you can see here, I want to use the armor class, but I can't simply just say armor. I have to say item.armor because I imported the module item. I did not specifically import armor into the file. So if I were to run this, as you can see here, it says item.py has been imported. That is the print statement here at the very bottom. Since this does not exist within a class definition or a function definition, it's just a line of code that's in this file, it will get executed when it's loaded into memory. So the print statement gets called. And this right here is simply from us creating our armor class object. And I forgot to mention this, but I did also make a modification to each of the classes. So I add the magic method str for all of them. So it'll return their information when I print out the object itself, just to make the printouts a little bit easier. So I have it print out armor1, and it prints out all the information that has to do with armor. So that's the most basic import example in Python. Now to teach you another keyword, as. So still using just import item, but we can add as, and I could say it. So basically what we're saying here is import the module item, but then change its name reference to it. So as you can see here, VS Code is saying, I don't know what item is, and that's because we imported item as it. So if we delete E and M and then run the code again, and it still works. Now I'm going to teach you another keyword, and that's from. So when we just say import item or import item as it, then we have to reference the module name in order to access the classes inside of it. But what if we just want to be able to call upon the class without doing that? That's where the from keyword comes in. So I'm going to delete this line here. We say from item, so from the module item, import armor. And because of that, I can delete this here and just call upon armor. So when I run it, it still works. We can also use as here as well. I could say import armor as AR. Run the code, and it still works. We can also import multiple classes from the same file in the same line. So I can say armor, comma, weapon. And then I can create a weapon class. And then we can print out weapon. Then I run the code. It will print out the weapon information. And there's a couple of different ways to do this. If you have a lot of stuff that you might be importing from a single module that would cause the line to go across the screen like this, then what you can do is open up a pair of parentheses and put the name of the items you want to import from the module inside. And it makes it a little bit easier to read. It's a little bit cleaner. And they don't have to all be new lines separated. You can put them in like this. You can have multiple lines like that. You can break it down however. As long as it's contained within the parentheses, it will know how to import it. And this does not limit you from using the as keyword here when you need to. So this would still work. So you could still import them with the as keyword and change their reference name. Now there's one more way to import from a module. Maybe there's multiple things you want to import, but you don't want to import them all by name. Technically you should. You should always import all the items that you need to import from a module by name. But if for some reason you don't, you can simply use asterisk, and that basically means import everything. So armor and weapon will automatically be imported. And we would have access to item and equipment as well if we so desired. And real quick, because I said you can import anything really, classes, functions, and variables, I threw together a quick example just showing variables and functions being imported. It's not really that much different from classes, but I still want to show that in action. So I have a file here called funcvars. It's got two variables and a function. We import from funcvars max, test, and do something. And then I can just print them out and call the function like normal. So if I run this code, these lines are still here, so those are going to still print out. But then at the bottom, I cleared all the printouts for the items just to have those three things print out. And we've got 25, true, and did something, which, if you look at this file, is basically what these values are. So just a quick example I wanted to throw out there. Like they all work the same way, but I still wanted to show importing work on pretty much everything. We're mostly going to be showing off classes and stuff, but I wanted to show off with some functions and variables as well. Now, a couple of things to note about importing. The first thing is that even if we were to only specify armor and weapon to be imported, we're not technically saying only load those two classes into memory. Whenever we use any form of import statement, the entire module that we reference gets loaded into memory. Whenever we say import something, like say specifically armor and weapon for this file, we're basically saying make these classes visible to this file. So item and equipment are both loaded into memory, and if another file needed them, all Python will do is just simply return the reference to those classes so that it can use it. They're already in memory. We're simply telling Python that this file simply needs the references for armor and weapon. So you're not really saving resource costs by only specifying a few items to be imported from the module. Everything still gets loaded into memory that's in that module. Another important thing to note is that when we load a module for the first time, it won't get loaded again the next time we create an import statement for that module. So if we had two separate files that were importing items from the item module, like say we imported armor here, but we imported weapons somewhere else, we would still have to use the import statements for both of those files. However, since this is the main file and armor gets imported first, item has already been loaded by this point. So by the time it actually reaches the file that imports weapon, Python is simply just giving it the reference to the weapon class. It doesn't load item into memory again, and therefore it does not execute anything inside the item module again as well. We can make import statements to item multiple times across different files, but only the first time does everything actually get executed. So any variables or objects that may have been created when that file was imported, they won't be modified or changed inadvertently because you had to load in an object somewhere else. And that's why I have the print statement there, is to demonstrate that. So to demonstrate that, I'm going to make a second file. We'll just call it second.py. And here we'll say import item. And then under it, we'll say print second.py imported. So what should happen is that we import second, and second will import item. And I'm actually going to put this as the first line, so that second will import the item class first. So we'll import second, which will import item, and then those two will get loaded. So we should see the item message get printed first, followed by the second message, and then main will say, hey, I need the references for armor and weapon, in which case Python will give it to it so that it can create these two objects here and then print out the information. So if I run this, item imported, second imported, and we didn't see a second item imported message print, and then it proceeded to execute everything like normally. So we will have to make several import lines across different programs to access the same stuff sometimes, but it's not going to cause the module to continuously be reloaded every time we do that. So it won't take away from performance or resources. It's simply going to tell Python, hey, if you've got this in memory already, I need the references to these items. And Python will give that to the module that asked for it. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the various situations that importing can occur, as well as how you would handle importing those items, because depending on how you're writing your program and the way it gets executed, that will affect how you can import stuff. On top of that, you won't be just importing modules from within your own program. You could be importing modules that's from Python itself, or you could also be importing modules from third-party libraries. So when it comes to importing stuff from Python itself, it's actually very simple and straightforward. As long as you know the module name, you can just import it. And it's easy to find the information online to figure out what module you need to import and whether or not you have to import stuff from the module specifically. For example, I can say import sys. This imports the Python system library. And with this, I can call the command sys.exit with the number 0 inside of it, and that will cause the program to exit before anything can be executed. Just to show you real quick, see, it imported item, but it didn't do anything else because the program exited before it can do anything. So that's how you would import Python modules. It's very simple and straightforward. They don't have to actually be visible to you inside your project folders in order to actually access them. They're built into Python. Third-party libraries are kind of the same. You don't necessarily have to physically see them inside your project folder in order to actually use them. As long as you know they're installed, you can actually import them pretty easily. In fact, when it comes to third-party libraries and using them in your code, Python is probably one of the easiest languages to be able to do that. You simply install the package that you want to use onto your system, and then you just import it. Python will handle the rest. Just as a demonstration, from ruaml.yaml import, that's a third-party library right there. It's basically a library that allows me to read and write YAML configuration files in my Python programs. It's a very useful library. And as you can see right there, it's simple and straightforward. I didn't have to do anything special to load it up or anything like that. I can just call upon it immediately. Python will be able to find it no problem when I execute this program. Now, when it comes to importing modules that you wrote yourself to be within your program, they're part of your program and you have to import them from other locations inside your program, there's a few things to make note of when you're actually doing that. Earlier in the video, I did say that files are referred to as modules. Folders are technically referred to as modules as well. So I dropped my item.py file into a folder called data, which I just created and added in there. So in order to call upon those classes now, I have to now say data.item import armor weapon in order to access these objects. And directories can go as deep as you need them to be. They can be split up into different things. As long as you make the imports correctly, you will be able to access them. It's basically the paths. And these paths are actually relative to the entry point. And in this case, the entry point is the main file. So if I were to go back a directory and then say python basic/main.py, it still loads up correctly and everything because the import statement is relative to the entry point of the program, which in this case is our main.py file. However, there is another way to write your program's entry point, in which case you would have to write the import a little bit differently. And I will set that up real quick to show you. Okay, so for this example, I've renamed our main.py file to this. So we have 2 underscores followed by main, followed by 2 more underscores, .py. So there is a flag that we can use in the Python command that will cause Python to look for this file name specifically and execute it in this manner. However, if we use it this way, then we have to modify how we import things because it's technically changed how the entry point is treated for the Python program. Instead of using Python on the main file itself to run the program, we actually have to use Python on the directory that contains our main file. In this case, it would be entry point. And as a result, it affects how we import internal code within our program. Any internal code that we import from within our program has to start with the name of the folder that contains our main file. In this case, it would be entry point. So in here we have from entry point .data .item to import our armor and weapon. And that would be the same for any other imports we'd make internally. No matter what file we make that import line from, it has to start from entry point and build all the way up to the end module that we're trying to get to. So to demonstrate how you would execute this program, we say python -m for module, then we say entry point because the folder entry point is a module and it's a module that contains the file __main__.py. And this means you also have to make sure that you are outside of the directory of the Python program you're going to run. So I'm currently inside the importing directory, which contains the entry point directory. So you have to be just outside the directory of the Python program you're trying to execute in this manner. And then I hit enter, and then the program runs. And because we set it up like this, if we were to try to run the program like normal, say entry point main.py, it won't like it because we're now treating the entry point as the main.py file specifically instead of the folder that contains it. And so when it tries to import stuff, it's like, I don't see this entry point folder that you're talking about, so I can't find this module. So how you write your entry point for your programs, it will determine how you're able to import your internal code. And if you have a bunch of modules that are importing other modules that are all internal to your code, they all have to use the same module path when they use the import statement. That import statement in the main file is not unique to the main file. Everyone else would have to follow a similar import pattern when they type in the module, regardless of where they may be located in relation to the module they're trying to import. So in order to demonstrate that, I've created a second data directory here, and I've added a Python file called second. And our item file here, which is in the other data folder, we're going to import second. So to do that, we say import entry point dot second data dot second. So even though item is within the data folder, we still write out imports to other modules like this, where we start with the base entry point and move up. So if I call upon the program, item was able to import second and it printed out the statement, and then item got imported and then everything got created. And this is not limited to programs where we set up the entry point like this. If our entry point is simply main.py and we're running the program by saying python main.py or whatever we might name our entry point file, the point of reference for importing modules still works the same way. So while we may not necessarily have to say entry point.second.data.second or entry point.data.item, we would still have to say data.item or second data.second for any file that's trying to import it, regardless of that file's location, like that, where it's not treating the folder name basic as part of the module import. It's not needed here because we didn't set it up to be like that. Okay, the last thing we're going to talk about is dynamic importing. It's very, very useful, especially if you want to write a program that can be extensible using plugins or mods or something, and you want people to write their own Python plugins to add functionality to whatever your software might be, this would be the way to do it. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to do a very basic example to show you how you can do a dynamic import, which some people would also refer to as just importing by string. So first we need to import a Python library called importlib, which I have up here. Then we call upon this function from importlib called import module. As you can see, I am referencing a module path, data.item. So data.item. And we're importing something from that module. We're importing armor. And when we call this, we have to store the results into a variable. And I'm storing it in something called mod, short for module. And the reason we need to do that is because we have to be able to reference the module that we imported in this manner. So by doing this, I can call upon the armor class by saying mod.armor and then passing the information like usual and store it in an object here. And forgot one last thing. Let's print out armor1 and then run our code. And we got our standard item.py imported and then all the information for the armor object that we created. And that's how you would import something dynamically. And that's it for importing in Python. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it helpful, and if you did, then please hit the like button and leave a comment below to let me know what you think. And if you want to see more, head on over to Wayfair Coding Academy channel to check out my other content. And while you're there, subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on new stuff as it comes out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.